The cylinder fell open with a small click, and 48 empty shells caught the light. They lay in a neat row on the lane barrier where she had set them down. Beside them sat the gun, cool now, and the small brass tool she used to feed it. Above her head, a war drone hung in the air, fully charged, every sensor live. Then it powered itself off. No alarm, no order, no reason a drone should ever do that. I have taught killers for 14 years. I had never seen a weapon decide on its own to stand down. Let me take you back to that morning, before any of it made sense to me. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not plasma. Not the burnt metal tang of a shield bleed. It was older than that, sharp and faintly like struck matches. The kind of smell that should not move through clean vents. My throat sac flickered pale before I could stop it. In 14 years on this range, no scent had ever told me a student had carried the past onto my floor. I run the Kinetic Doctrine range on Station Brasquetour. For 100 meters of hard corridor split into 6 lanes, each one walled by shield panels that swing open and shut about 5 times a second. Miss a shot and the range does not just let it go. Catches the round and throws it back at you. The range does not forgive a slow hand. I built it that way on purpose. The students sorted themselves the way they always do. 3 Scarn dropped into low braces in lane 2. Knee joints locking with that hard click, already reading the panel rhythm. The Lural could not hold still, pacing tight loops, planning shots that moved. The Devante bunched up shoulder to shoulder, useless apart, steady only when they touched. Then I saw her in lane 4, the worst lane, shortest gaps, highest bounce back. She was small and soft-skinned, no armor, no impact gel, hair tied back with a plain band. She was not reading the panels. She was not doing the math. She was rolling a little brass thing between her palms, slow and idle, the way a student handles a warm-up weight. I logged it as personal gear and moved my eyes elsewhere. Cadet, I said. The range carried my voice clean to every lane. The issued sidearm is on the rail to your left. You will not bring personal gear onto a live lane. She looked at the plasma sidearm. She looked back at me. Is the air always this slow? The smells are going to sit. The floor went quiet. My throat sac brightened 2 full shades before I could press it flat. In all my years here, no student had walked onto my range and opened by asking about the vents. I came down off the platform and crossed to her lane in 9 steps. Up close, the brass thing was easy to name. A loader. A hand-crank tool for feeding a chemical round gun, the kind of object my own catalog files under obsolete. She held the gun in her other hand. Short barrel. 8 chambers. Matte black. Made by some world that had not yet found energy weapons. 2 letters were filed into the rim of the loader, small and worn smooth. That gun, I said careful and slow, will not punch through the lattice at any useful angle. The panels are rated to absorb 4,200 joules of impact. A round that size carries about 400. She looked up at me. I know. That was all. She set the loader in her chest pocket, 2 fingers from her hand, and rested her thumb on the gun. The drill started at 9:14. Drones dropped from the ceiling, 4 to a lane. The panels began their swing. The air system pulled the pressure down a notch to fake a high, thin sky around the floor. Every student went to work the way their kind always does. I want you to understand something. I have run this drill for 38 groups of students. I know what a person looks like when the drones launch. I know the locked stance, the fixed stare. What she did, my manuals have no name for. She reached into her pocket. The brass loader turned once in her palm. 1 practice twist and 8 rounds dropped into the gun in about a second and a half. She did not look at the loader. She did not look at her hands. She was watching the panels. The drone closed to 6 meters. She fired twice inside the same open gap. The range's impact reader stopped. The screen over lane 4 made a long, confused sound. The first round the panels had swallowed, just as rated. The second had slipped through the narrow gap between 2 closing panels and hit nothing but drone. The screen read, unshielded hit. Drone down. My throat sac lit bright amber. In my culture, that color means fear or the full collapse of a working idea. I pressed my collar flat and stared. The second drone came in. She loaded the same way, read the next gap, fired at a hard sideways angle, and did not shift her stance by any amount I could measure. Drone 3 went down. No armor. No shields. No second look at her own hands. My own manual, Section 7, says, ballistic fire against a swinging lattice is categorically improbable. I had written that line myself. The word improbable was doing heavy work in that sentence. Right then, it was being retired. Across the floor, everyone else was failing. The scarn locked up as the pressure shifted, joints frozen, waiting for a balance that would not come for hours. The Devante formation fell apart. 2 Lural were walked off the floor after near hits from their own bounce back. And Lane 4 kept logging clean hits one after another into a system that had never been asked to count this fast for one shooter. By the 8-minute mark, the screen stopped warning me and started doing something else. A soft, repeating tone. It did not sound like an alert. It sounded like a question. Like the range itself was asking me to explain what it was seeing. I could not. I watched her work, and I felt the floor of my certainty give way. She was not lucky. Luck does not repeat 24 times. She had done this before on some world that taught hands to move while eyes stayed on the threat. She knew the joule rating before I said it. She knew the gap timing better than the people who tuned the panels. The range I built to punish the careless had met someone it could not touch. And it was the range that broke first. By the 20-minute mark, she had fired 48 rounds. Then she stopped. She set the gun on the lane barrier. She set down the loader. She asked about the airflow. The last drone hung 3 meters over her head, fully charged, sensors hot. For 6 seconds, it searched for a live weapon and a threat. It found a person standing still with empty hands and a calm face. So it made the only call its code aloud. It read her as harmless and shut itself down. The room held its breath. The gap runs about 1/5 of a second, she said, not loud at all. Is that the factory setting? Or has it drifted? I did not answer for 4 seconds. My people have a word for the moment your map of the world stops matching the world. It means more or less, the lights are still on, but the building has moved. I was standing inside that word, and already I knew I would go back to the data that night and hunt for the math error I would never find. The next morning, the doctrine committee met without notice. The session ran 38 minutes. By the start of the next cycle, a change went out to every range instructor on the station. Section 7 no longer called ballistic fire categorically inefficient. It now read, method dependent on the skill of the shooter. No one signed the change. It sat in the manual as if it had always been there. 2 days later, I filed my own request. I asked that human cadets be moved out of historical methods familiarization and into real kinetic instruction. It was approved in 6 hours. I did not go to the approval. I was at the console running the lane data for the 3rd time. 6 weeks on, they moved the loader. It went down to sublevel 3, to the long hall of glass cases where the Academy keeps tools of note in the history of galactic combat. They set it in case 7C under one narrow light that caught the brass at a low angle. The card beneath it named it Human Loading Device, Brass, 8-chamber. Recovered from Lane 4, the classification line had been crossed out and rewritten. From obsolete to precision gap instrument. A last note said the cadet had asked for it back, and the request was denied. I went down on a cycle when the hall was empty. The only sound was the air system, which I noticed was moving very well now. Clean, quick, quiet, the way it had not been the morning she arrived. I thought about the gap she read better than my engineers. I thought about 8 rounds dropping home in a 1.5 seconds while her eyes never left the lane. I thought about the world that must have taught a child what 1/5 of a second costs. I had built a range that forgives nothing. I was starting to think she had never once asked it to. I left without killing the light. Behind me, the old brass took the beam and held it, and would not give it back.